So without further ado, give it up for Stro Elliot, everybody. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Good, yeah.
So you're busy, man.
A little bit.
For those of us who don't know why you're so busy, most musicians have got, either work full-time in the studio or part-time in the evenings, but you've got some daily thing going on, man. You're busy.
I do, yeah. First of all, hi. How is everybody doing? I've had a pretty busy schedule as just Stro Elliot for the last couple years. Picking up a lot more gigs and kind of doing live sets. But as of like 4 months ago, I joined the Roots, the band The Roots, and they are, as you know, one of the hardest working bands in the world. So they're the house band for the Tonight Show. So we film 5 days a week, pretty much every week, and we're there. And then pretty much, which I'm surprised I was actually able to make this gig, because when we're not doing the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, we're doing Roots shows. So any break or whatever, it's like, okay, let's get on a plane and go somewhere and do a show. So I'm very, very thankful that I have the time to come and do this, because I saw a lot of the clips from last year. A good friend of mine, Jazzy Jeff, and a couple other people attended last year and told me about how great it was. So, but besides doing that, I'm still a full-time producer in and out of studio sessions, kind of doing a lot of work with other artists and other producers as well. So yeah, full plate.
Cool. I'm curious about the audition process for the Roots. How was that?
The audition process. Yeah. Well, there really was an audition, as snobby as that sounds. I had the privilege of working with them a couple of times over the last couple of years. Kind of in and out of the studio. They did a couple of live things. One in particular, they do this thing called the Roots Picnic that they do every year. One in Philly, and then they did one last year in New York.
It's like a festival, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And tons of artists, big stage. So the one that they did in New York last year, one of their big headliners was Wu-Tang Clan. So Amir Questlove, his idea was, he was like, look, I don't want this to sound like hip-hop karaoke. So what I want to do, because I know what you do with finger drumming, I want you to play the actual sample drums that RZA sampled for the record, and the band will play on top of what you do. The homie Jeremy Ellis was there as well, sort of triggering samples and sounds, as well as DJ J Period, who was, with all the little vocal and kung fu, vocal snippets and whatnot. So that was kind of my first kind of like interest into working with them in a live setting. And things just kind of continued to escalate from there. Started working with them on their album at Electric Lady Studios in New York a couple months after that. Till, eventually there was the call from Amir. He was like, look, the guys really appreciate what you do. I appreciate what you do. We'd love to have you in the band. That means that you got to move from LA to New York, which I'll be completely honest, I've never had a desire to move to New York. It's cold, and it's cold. On top of the fact that it's just far away from the West Coast where I spent the last 15 years. But so far, so good. I mean, winter is around the corner, so I'm not looking forward to that. But the city is great. The guys are great. Everyone down at the network is great. And, of course, the Roots are great. So cool.
Nice one. Curious, talk us through your kind of early beat making. How you started making beats, and then when did you go from actually making beats to actually knowing that being dexterous is quite important?
Sure. I started yesterday. And,
of course you did.
No. I kind of started in, I don't come from a musical family. So, I have a lot of friends that came from a musical family. There was instruments around the house. There was, music. I did have music around the house. My father had a decent record collection. I actually really appreciate his record collection because it wasn't big, but he had a little bit of everything.
What kind of records?
Yeah, you'd have soul, so you'd have your Curtis Mayfield, Earth, Wind and Fire, but then you'd have like a Carole King record. He'd have his Led Zeppelin record. He'd have, there was a little bit of everything in there for me to go and sort of say, okay, I like this, let me find more of this. I like this, let me find more of that. So, but my parents didn't have a clue about my infatuation with music. They knew that I loved listening to it. but didn't know that I was curious about making it. So I begged and begged and begged, and finally one year they bought me a PSR 400 Yamaha keyboard. If anybody's familiar with this keyboard, it's crap. It's nothing. But for me at the time, it was everything. It didn't sample. It had like kind of a very bare bones sequencer in it. But it was enough for me to sort of get ideas out. And I also came from the school of people which I would find out who did the stop tape dubbing. I don't know if you're familiar with that technique. But basically what you do, if you have a cassette deck that has 2 decks in it, you play one deck, you record on the other deck. And so what I would do is I would play, let's say I play a Led Zeppelin drum break. I would play that drum break and record it on there and stop it at the loop, rewind it, and do that over and over again until I had a 4-minute drum loop. And so that together with the fact that my boombox had a mic in means that I was able to come out of the keyboard and plug into the radio, which enabled me to put extra sounds on top of that drum loop and continue that round robin way of working through the context. It was very ghetto. It's very tedious. It was a lot of work for probably minimal effort, but that was my introduction into kind of music production. And I think it was probably best that I started that way because that was probably the most creative way that I could make music, using the minimal tools. And that's something that I still swear by these days. There's tons of plugins and, there's different DAWs and whatnot, but I find that when I do my best work is when I have a very minimal setup and kind of minimal things to kind of pull from, so.
Cool. And at what point did you explore the whole kind of finger drumming thing? When did that?
Well, early on, I came from being a drummer. I wasn't classically trained or anything, but my first instrument was trumpet, actually. And I was stationed, my father was in the military, so oddly enough, my father was actually stationed here in Germany during my high school years. So what happened is that coming from the school that I came from in the States, it took them a long time to get my paperwork. So when I showed up to the school, they were like, okay, you're in band, what do you play? And I didn't tell them I played trumpet. I told them I played drums because I always wanted to play drums. And so they were like, all right, let's see what you can do. And I played, and they were like, okay, that works. By the time they got my paperwork, it was kind of too late. I was kind of already headed into playing drums. But that carried over into when I moved back into the States. Of course, the problem with, moving into any small apartment in the States is you can't have a drum kit, in your apartment without getting kicked out quickly. So at the time, I had an MPD pad, which is 16 pads, which is literally a fourth of what we're looking at here. And so just to kind of give you a backstory, in my first introduction to hip hop, listening to people like Pete Rock and Marley Marl and Eric Sermon and some of the great producers, in my brain, I thought that when you heard a track by Pete Rock, that he was playing the drums live on his pads. And so I started saying, oh, okay, I have to learn to play pads if I want to learn how to program drums. It wasn't until years later that I saw, when YouTube came in the fold, that I saw a video of him doing it one at a time. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, So I kind of left it alone for a while. It's always something that I used, as I'll explain when I'm working. It's something that I use as a tool to sort of get the idea out or for inspiration, but I didn't really start bringing it back into the fold until maybe like 2 years ago. I was working at the good brother Jazzy Jeff's house, and it was myself, incredible musician Cody Tatham, Daniel Crawford, who's also an amazing keyboardist, and we showed up for these sessions, and we were the first 3 people there. And so we were waiting on the rest of these musicians and people to show up. And, we're itching to make music. We're like, look, there's a studio here. Let's do something. And so I had my MPD pad in my laptop. Daniel had a controller keyboard. Jeff had a Rhodes and some other keyboards and stuff there for Cody to play with. And so we just kind of started jamming. And I think initially what Jeff thought is I would just sort of pull up some drum loops or some pre-recorded stuff. But he comes in the room and he sees me playing the drums. And he's like, wait. He's like, you play drums live on pads? And I was like, yeah. And like immediately, like Jeff's brain, he's just like, you need to push. And I was like, no. I'm good. I'm fine. I'm comfortable in this particular thing. And he's like, no. You need to push. So fast forward 2 weeks later, I get home and waiting on my doorstep is an Ableton Push. And I didn't open it for the first 2 weeks because it was, it's an intimidating looking machine. There's a lot of pads, there's a lot of knobs, and I also didn't know Ableton. Sure. So I had a showcase that I was doing, and I wanted to incorporate, some more ideas and do something a little bit more expansive than what I had been doing with just the MPD. So I tried it out, and long story short, one thing opened up another door, opened up another door, opened up another door, and it leads to me being here and now. This pretty much being the brain of everything I do now. So.
Sure thing. Okay, so we've got a bit of a treat for you guys. It's called, track deconstruction, but we figured we'd do a kind of like deconstruction, reconstruction, because it's Stro Elliot, right? So let's take it.
Okay.
What have you got for us?
All right, are we up and running? Or
yeah.
No? Okay.
Just maybe you want to resize.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so what I have here is basically, just an idea. I didn't necessarily know, whoops, let me get here. I have, just like a lot of producers, I have a lot of ideas that I sort of started and didn't finish. This particular idea was just something I always liked Beyonce's vocals on an album called Party. It's a real throwback kind of track, but I thought her vocals are really dope. And anybody who's familiar with my work, if you're not, I do a lot of reworks and remixes and whatnot, and try to bring something different out of the mixes. It's saying my audio engine's off. Hold on 1 second. So I can turn this.
It's a very colorful array of.
Yeah. No, what this is. So I have a template. Everyone has like a template that they say when they open Ableton. So my template is basically set up for me to get going as soon as it's up. So I have this.
That's a rainbow, man.
Yeah, but it's so my memory knows what everything is. Red is low end. Orange is kind of high end. Purple is kind of anywhere in between. But some things are colored just based off the fact that I just kind of know what they are. So this is literally just kind of an array of percussion. My gig with the Roots is pretty much a percussionist. So at any given moment, I'll boot up something in case, they want me to start doing something. And so I'll have an array of percussion to use for whatever they might want to do. So this is set as my template. So it opens with this. I think there's another track with percussion on it. There's a drum rack opened up, and just so that I can sort of dive right in as soon as I open up a session. So this particular vocal, let me get rid of this again. Why are you still there? There we go.
You a bad girl and your friends bad too. Oh, you got the swag sauce, you drippin' swag goo.
That's Kanye, of course. But I don't know if you're familiar with this track at all. But it has.
My love.
You know what? Yo, peep this.
I told my girls you can get it. Don't slow it down. Just let it.
So as you can see there, I've already warped it. And everybody warps a little bit differently. I kind of go for the feel more than anything instead of having it exactly locked in on every single grid point. And especially this vocal is a great example of that because she kind of lays back in a lot of her vocals. And so I don't want to lose that all the time. There's some things that I want kind of locked on, but for the most part, I want to maintain the feel. So you see there are parts where I'm really busy, and then you see parts where I'm not touching it at all, like in this section. And so basically with something like this, it depends. Like I'll take one of two routes where I'll say, okay, I'm going to do a flat out remix, leave the vocals just the way that they are, and then just create music around it in a different, in a different style or fashion or whatnot. In this particular sense, I think I tried that, and I think that was the thing that I didn't like, which is why I left it the way that it is here. I think what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna try to just take certain parts of it that I like. So, what Where to start? I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to first convert this guy into a simpler.
Why is that useful?
The simpler?
To convert it from a audio track to a simpler.
Because it allows me to lay it out, you know, to use the amazing function that is actually what did I just do? Oh. The amazing function that is the slicing. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to, you know, if I'm stumped and I'm you know, kind of stuck on an idea, I kind of let Ableton kind of decide where it thinks the chops are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In most cases, I end up doing it myself because I kind of already have an idea of the pieces that I want to take. So in this instance, we have...
You a bad girl.
So you were just adjusting the sensitivity, right?
Yes,
So
sorry.
That's
I
right.
adjusted the sensitivity. Actually, I kind of moved, it was shortened for some reason. It only had a small section of it, so I just kind of stretched it out to where it gets more of the track. Now, no disrespect to Kanye, but I'm not really interested in his vocals here. I might use it as an intro or something, you know, on a finished version. But I really want Beyonce's. And I'll probably turn the sensitivity down because it's just getting little bitty pieces here.
But I'm ready to give my love.
See, and now right now, I already know that I'm gonna want to go in and do it manually because the piece that is grabbing in the way that the sensitivity is laying out is leaving out huge blocks of things that I want separated. So I'm gonna turn the sensitivity all the way down, and this will probably be a little bit time consuming, but I'll try to be quick about it. What I'll do is I'll take just a section. The hook is the money here.
So tonight, we like to party. We like to party. We like to pop. We like to party. Your touch is driving. We like to party. We like to party.
Start there.
We like to party. We like to party.
Whoops. You have to turn it on first.
We like to party.
We like to party. Party, y'all know what y'all do. We like to party, party.
We like to party. Your touch is driving. Your touch is driving me crazy.
And kind of a shortcut that I noticed because the way that I was used to chopping in the MPD is that you sort of go in, you sort of decide where the chops are in terms of sort of moving a knob like left and right. Now, when you do this in manual mode, so this next pad will just continue playing the rest of it. But I don't want any of this section here. So what I'll do is I'll set this and just use this. I'll create another one. So this will just become a nothing pad. So this now becomes my next starting point that I can decide where it starts.
I can't, the way I feel. Top down with the rose, don't let me go. So in you go, so in love you go, so you go, so in love, so in love, so in love, so in love, so in love. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they say.
Get another nothing pad.
Don't care what they say. I don't care if talking too much, too much. Tonight, the night that I give you everything. Music, knock until the knock.
Helps that you know the vocal, right? So you know where the check points are.
Morning light, 'cause we like to party.
Set the scene, 3,000
Okay.
degrees.
Don't want you either, Andre. Sorry. So this would be a good place for me to start. I might go back in later and grab other pieces, but I know from a creative standpoint that I like what she's doing vocally here at this point. So. Okay, and then I usually adjust the volume a little bit in here. Drum-wise, it's going to be louder. So, let me see. Tempo-wise, let me see what we're looking at here.
What are you thinking?
We'll start here. I might speed it up or slow it down.
Any takers on the tempo?
Yeah, no, fast or slow.
Any takers? What is that? 89? So he's 85?
85, okay.
We like to pay your take, your take, your take, your take. Nice to know us. I don't care what they say.
Beginning is always the hardest. It's finding that initial spark that says, okay, this is where we're going to begin.
We like to take your take.
Because the thing is, I make things much harder on myself. Everything in Logic says we'll start from the beginning of a vocal line. No. Because it makes it, more interesting for me to try to make something different if I started from something else. And it comes from just what I feel like is a good place chord structure-wise to start from.
We like to take your us, give you everything. Every music, knock and touch till the morning. 'Cause we like hard on every music that I give
All right, I'm gonna just play around with it and see what it feels like. Which track are you? So much smaller with this on.
music. Knock until the morning. Give you that music, 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 morning.
So, I might not like it in the long run, but I'll start from here just to sort of start to build a rhythm around it so I can.
Music.
So from this point forward, it's literally just me having a jam session with myself until I come up with some things that I like. So I'm a drummer, so I always start with drums.
Music, 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 music. Knock until the morning. Give you that music, 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 music.
I'm gonna try something.
Knock until the morning. Give you that music, 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 music. Knock until the morning. Give you.
I think what I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna play something and then resample it. I think that'll make, because the thing with hip hop, which is where I come from, is that it's gotta sound dirty. There's gotta be an element of dirtiness to it. So these drums are fine. But also in trying to bring something else out of it. I feel like I could take what's there, manipulate it, and lay other drums on top of what's there. So bear with me for a second. We'll just play around with this for a little bit. Can we turn it up a little bit? So I think, so I think with what's there, I'll probably redo that Beyonce chop, that one I was a little late on. Now, one or two things I could do here. I could quantize this a little bit, because the thing that I don't want to happen, especially because I'm a little off with the Beyonce thing, is I don't want everything to sort of fall off. So, but the problem is, because I played the way that I played it, I like the feeling of the rolls and stuff in it. So I think for now, I'm going to mute what Beyonce is doing and redo that and come back to that and work with this drum chop right now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an audio track.
So did you quantize that? Did you keep them unquantized?
I just kept, it's not quantized.
It's a Stro quantized.
Yeah, it's not quantized at all. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to resample the drum kit. Where it comes from? I'm going to resample this drum kit so I have an audio version of it that I can then take and chop up if I want. That's all I'll probably need, because I'm probably not going to use all of that. So, turn you off. Now that I got you here. So again, convert this.
The whole thing?
The whole
into
thing.
drummer, okay, cool.
Turn it into simpler. Now with this, I'm not looking to chop it up into little tiny pieces. I'm looking for large chunks of loops. Let's see what happens.
Just a question about your playing. So, do you have fixed velocity on the pads, or do you just know?
Well, in the setup when over here, I have this specifically set up to my likings, which is pad sensitivity is at 8, pad gain is at 5, the dynamics at 6. I can't remember what the factory settings were, but I remember that this felt more comfortable because of the fact that when I'm playing drums, just as a real drummer does, you like it to be as sensitive as, if I'm playing it lightly on the snare, I want it to sound that way. So in here, the push gives me the great, flexibility, being able to make it as velocity sensitive as I like it. So this is my personal setup. Now I want to do that again.
Music.
3,000.
We like music.
Okay, I like that better. Let's do that again.
Music. 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 Music.
Okay, so let me get rid of the old one because I like this one better. So.
Music. 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 Music.
So now it comes into the sound design part of it for me because that drum loop is great. It's cool, but it's not the end goal for me. It's the drum loop. What I want those drums to be is more texture than anything for what I'm going to put on top of that. So I use a lot of different sort of plugins. Some favorites are, not to name drop other company stuff, but there's some Fab Filter stuff that I use quite a bit. There's some Native Instrument stuff that I use quite a bit. I think here, what I'm gonna do first off to just try to jumble it up a little bit is I'm gonna use something of a delay or something, maybe, let me see. Green delay, where's the filter delay? No? What did I use on you before? I actually had it over here, so I'll move it here. Whoops.
Which one did you decide? Hello?
What?
I know you're in the zone and all that.
Sorry.
We just want to know what you chose. That's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it's the complex delay filter that's in Ableton. I don't know if I'm gonna keep it yet, which is why I didn't say anything. I'm gonna try it though. Put that there. Keep the feedback.
Music.
Okay. That's interesting. What else? I'm gonna pull in Fab Filter Saturn, which is a go-to that I use quite a bit. speed it up a little bit for now. So now I'm gonna drag in just a kit that I always start with. I might keep it, I might not. Which is just, oh, it's in there already. I'll do this in. So now I'm just going to use a sequencer just to lay this stuff out. Couple of these a little bit. So this one I want a little bit more volume on. So I might come back and work with the drums.
Cool.
But sorry.
That's all right. I've got loads of questions.
Oh, sorry.
No, so a couple. So it was interesting how the journey you went from having the, kind of acoustic sounding drums, you chopped those up, and it was almost like the track could have gone one direction.
Yeah.
But it was almost like you did a switch, right? Okay, it's gone from being maybe what could have been the break and been the meat of the track to actually being percussive. Can you just talk us through why there was a switch? I know it's, the situation's not normal, but
that's
I'm just
again
curious.
probably a case of me making things harder for myself. I just think it makes things more interesting the more that you push. The more that you push on something rather than just sort of leaving it as it is, makes other things happen. So sure, I could have left it as what it was. I think I know when I'm working on something and where I'm starting out, whether or not it's going to be interesting in the end, at least for me. I know from where I started that was a cool idea, but just playing around with it, kind of gives you kind of branches out. Now this particular layup now gives me other melody ideas because I think melody has a lot to do sometimes with what happens rhythmically. So rhythmically, what was happening there before, maybe some little funky bass line to it. Throw some keys on it, and that was it. This kind of opens it up a little bit more now for me, where I feel like I can do, I can still go a couple different routes if I want. I can make it into something dance if I wanted to speed it up and throw 4 on the floor. I can keep it as it is, maybe even slow it down and go all the way trap if I want, depending on what now melodically I add to it. So now this is kind of a good starting point for me to build melody or a chord structure on top of it, and the melody and chord structure will then determine what happens with everything that I just did. It's very likely that all of a sudden, once I start working with melody and chord structure, that I go back and say, okay, now I don't like what these drums are doing. I either want to simplify it or make it more busy, or sometimes it's just a matter of tempo, which is hugely important. I think that's probably one of the most important things that I learned early on is that tempo is everything. Not to sidetrack too much, but there's this great quote from Quincy Jones where he was talking about a tune called Little Darling, this classic jazz track. And I forget who the writer was, but the writer brought him this chart. And the original tempo of the song was like, and Quincy Jones was like slower. It was either Quincy Jones or it was Count Basie. He could have been quoting him. But he slowed it down. He kept going slower, slower, until eventually it became bang, 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 bang. And it's a classic tune now. But that's something that I took note of because I was like, wow, that makes a big difference when you pay attention to what tempo does to the feel of either a melody or a song. So every time that I work, I'm never too stuck on a tempo until I'm stuck on a tempo, if that makes sense.
Well, you've got the flexibility of it,
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
And that's, again, the power of being able to sort of warp everything and have everything sort of move the way you want it allows me to sort of adjust tempos on the fly. Sometimes even in a live sense, in a live sense, I use pretty much this in an APC. And it's kind of like, the APC is kind of my two turntables, and this is kind of my live instrument. And I find that a lot of times I'll end up playing tracks either much faster or much slower than even I made them, because in the moment, just as every DJ knows, when you're playing a track, sometimes it just feels good at a certain tempo coming after whatever track you were playing before that. So that's the only time that kind of differs from me. But again, it just sort of shows you that, no tempo or no track is ever safe from a tempo change, depending on what the feel or the vibe is. So.
Cool. Before you hit the melody, I want to see if these guys have got any questions you'd like to
absolutely.
ask on the drums and beats kind of thing.
Yeah. Anyone?
Any quick questions? Question at the front here. If you just hold for the mic, please. Thank you.
So you just mentioned the MPC. What do you use the MPC for, and what do you use the?
I think it's APC, right?
The APC.
Oh,
yes.
APC.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you do volume stuff. And
Yeah, the
control.
APC is basically, like I said, is my DJ decks. Like with those is where I trigger the clips, where I sort of do blends. I have, all the things mapped out on effects knobs that make it so they blend in and out of each other. And this is what I play everything on, whether it's drums, whether it's keys, whether it's me triggering other samples and whatnot. Like becomes the instrument, the APC becomes the DJ decks, if you will. Yeah.
Nice one. Anyone else? Just keen to move. Oh, question in front here. Cool.
Well, actually, I was going to ask after you said MPC just then, did you come from that background at all? Do you use like the SP404 or the MPC at all?
Yeah, well, not the MPC. I was a late bloomer to the MPC. My first drum machine after the crappy PSR 400 was the ASRX. The ASRX, which they made a red one and they made a black one. I had the black one. The red one was the more powerful one because it had multi-outs and a couple other features, but I had a choice when I walked into the music store, and because everybody I knew had an MPC 2000. That was like, if you were making beats, you had an MPC 2000 when I got started. The SP was a little bit before me, even though I did know some people who had it. The reason I liked the ASR because it was a musical machine. Even the layout of the pads were laid out as an octave from a keyboard, so the pads kind of went up in an octave like this way. They were clingy, they were loud, annoying-ass pads, but I liked the layout of it and also what you could do internally to each pad. It also had a resampling feature, which I don't remember if the MPC had or not, at least the 2000 at the time. And again, as you just saw, like resampling is a big part of what I do. I like to take what I do and what I'm playing and resample myself to be able to get more ideas. So that particular machine was my weapon of choice. I eventually ended up stepping up to an MPC 1000, which was a smaller guy, and using that in conjunction with the ASR and my first foray into DAWs, which was Logic, I think. So,
Nice one. Okay, so melody.
Yeah. So. second. Okay, this is going to be really difficult to do with just the pads. To go to an old favorite here. I haven't used Massive in a while.
Cool. So you're going to layer the kind of guitar.
I think I want to just put a bass line under that and then try to go from there. Cool. Wow, it has been a minute.
So what sound you had next?
I'm looking for just something I can just map out some chords with. Again, not used to playing chords on the push as well as I should. Let me find.
got time for to record those chords and then some questions, and then
Okay.
you give the track to us, and then we dance to it.
Right. I'm gonna leave this real quick, and then it went up. Okay. That's the second half is all I wanted. So yeah, that's like
Cool.
basically the skeleton of it.
Sure, sure.
So yeah, from that point, I would add other little percussions. I would add other sections to it. Usually it's a little bit more involved, maybe chord structure-wise, but due to this guy. But yeah, that's pretty much the kind of format that I
The
follow with
essence, sure.
everything. Yeah.
So just a couple of things before I offer it to
Yeah.
audience. So two things. So with the kicks and the hi-hat business, with
Yeah.
the snares, do you have the same snare but velocity? Because the kind of flam that you did, I noticed.
Well, it depends. See, for the live drum things, using a program called Addictive Drums, which I use a lot just because of the realistic feel of them. Pretty much my go-to pattern for everything and the way that I lay drums out is that things are kind of laid out in an open format. So what these two fingers are doing are usually all hi-hat and ride cymbal related. Everything in the middle is everything else, which is kind of the way I think about drums. Like, you know, if I'm out here, you're either playing this way if you're cross stick or whatever and blah, blah, blah. Everything else happens in the middle. Because I'm also playing kick with my fingers, that, you know, of course involves something a little bit different. But as far as the way I program drums, I'm a big fan of layering drums. Like, you know, like, so let's say, for instance, this particular, that's 3 different sounds. And I don't know if we can go, well, I won't bore you with all that. But basically, with every drum sound that I try to create, I do what I like to call a character sound. The punch or the attack of the sound, and then maybe there's a third element thrown in there depending on whatever it needs. If you soloed everything out, you might hear something that just sounds like, you know what I'm saying?
Layered it will give that,
Yeah,
that
and that's
look.
just a super compressed something. So, and that's not meant for you to hear. It's more meant for you to feel. So when it's layered with my character snare, as well as whatever else I might lay on top of that, and some of that goes into the way that it's laid. 2 snares might be here, the character snare might be there in terms of where it's laid, in terms of where you play, which might mean that I just take, that I take a lot of the attack off of it. I do that a lot with 808s on top of kicks, because I don't necessarily want to hear the attack of the 808 kick. I just want to hear
You want the sub and the body,
low
yeah.
end. So that it's the same thing when I do when I program snares as well. Some things are laid according to what I want you to hear and feel. So
Nice one. Maybe we've got a chance for 1 or 2 questions? No, not at all? We're done?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Stro, thank you so much for that, man. Give it up for Stro Elliot. Thank you.